Welcome to the Mini Medical School podcast, where we dive into the world of medicine. I'm your host, Kane, a first-year medical student, and my guest today is Dr. Stephen Miller, Associate Dean for Continuing Professional Development and Medical Education at Dalhousie University. He develops and heads the Dalhousie Mini Medical School program, a program that provides evidence-based sessions. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Miller. Can you tell listeners a bit about yourself and your work on the Mini Medical School program?
Sure. Thanks, Kane. Thanks for having me here. Happy to be here today and talk about Mini Medical School. So Mini Medical School is something that I think we just offered the 18th season of Mini Medical School this past year. And it is one of the, I was going to say only, but it's definitely not only, because Serving and Engaging also has public offerings now, but one of the few public offerings that comes out of the medical school. It's fully funded by the medical school, and we have a very faithful, I guess, group of attendees who come to the Mini Medical School. Annually, we see anywhere from 800 to 1,000 participants in our 6 to 8 programs, and we do a needs assessment, which includes actually the needs of the public, which is a little bit different than some of our other needs assessments. So we actually survey our audience for the things that they would like to learn about in terms of medicine and health education, and try to fulfill the gaps in their education. We also survey departments throughout the medical school and look at areas that they feel would be beneficial for the public to learn about as well. So it's a really great program. Faculty are really excited to kind of participate in it and always kind of get jazzed about it, because I don't think they're really expecting the type of engagement they get from the audience. And so at the end of it, they're always very enthused about the participation, the types of questions they get, and all that sort of thing. So it's really a nice program to be able to bring to the public.
So you just completed the 18th season. Is there anything you're looking forward to in the 19th?
I think it's probably more of the same. I think the huge pivot for this program, well, of course, you probably get this if you were doing any sort of education or even working over the last few years. The pandemic forced a huge pivot with this program because, as many programs, it was delivered in person. So it used to be attendees would come to Theater A in the evening time, once a week or every other week kind of thing throughout the course of the program. But of course, that all shut down in 2020 with the pandemic. And so the quick pivot the next year was to move it to a virtual program. And in fact, the survey of our audience has been that they prefer that. And you can get that because the audience, while it's diverse, both in terms of visible, non-visible, age, all of the different demographics, but we do tend to cluster probably in the 55 plus age group. So for many of those folks, it's actually, there's safety issues around winter travel and then parking your car and getting here if there's ice and snow and all that kind of stuff. So it's just as easy to curl up in a chair at home and flip on your laptop and have some food or something that you'd like to drink and relax and enjoy it. So we have participants now that we have people from Australia, from Vancouver, your home, from people who vacation down south in the States, and lots of people from around the local region. So it's opened the doors for many to attend distantly, and it's always surprising to me when someone's away in Florida or they have family in Australia and they're tuning into Mini Medical School. But I think it's really kind of a neat thing.
That is interesting about Mini Medical School program. Have you done a presentation on simulated education?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Because simulation is becoming so important, we actually added a session around what is simulation and how does it benefit patients this past season. So Dr. Tanya Sullivan, who's an Emerge physician and oversees simulation for Nova Scotia Health and the Dal Family Medicine residency program, participated in that, and I moderated the session. It was well attended, and I think it provided the insight into simulation.
So speaking of simulated education, I understand you have done significant work in education simulations. Can you tell us the importance and benefits of using simulations in medical education?
Yeah, so way back in 2012, I did a master's in education, and back then there wasn't a lot of simulation. Actually, there are virtually no simulation activities. Virtually, there's play on words, no pun intended. There were very few simulated activities at the medical school, few in residency, few for practicing healthcare professionals, including physicians. So it seemed to me at that time, as I kind of dove into it, I knew I was interested in education and teaching and those sorts of things. But I really, when you do a master's, you kind of, all your study kind of builds on each bit. And so that was the area of focus I decided to build upon. And so as I kind of went through my master's program, I developed curriculum and evaluated the curriculum, and it all kind of built to a simulation instructor course, built in best evidence and best practice that was sort of my final project kind of thing in 2014 when I finished the course. And then we actually pulled together a group of committed and dedicated individuals who were very interested in simulation to put on the first simulation instructor course here at home, because prior to that, it was very expensive to travel to, for example, Harvard or many places in the United States, Royal College simulation programs, thousands and thousands of dollars. Like I'm talking $5,000 to $10,000 for folks to travel to those courses. So it was nice to have a homegrown course that we were able to train 250 to 300 instructors over 5 or 6 years in, sort of thing, because you can't insert simulation into the curriculum until you actually have people who are trained to instruct and teach the simulation sessions the way that they should flow. So you may have heard the phrase see one, do one, teach one. Have you ever heard that phrase?
No, I haven't. Can you explain that?
So when we went to medical school, that was kind of the phrase. I can still remember when I was a Med 1. Your age, or not your age maybe, but your state in school. And I did an emergency medicine rotation, or elective, I guess, during the Med 1 year. I was there were only 2 or 3 people who actually got clinical electives. Everyone else had to do some kind of paper-based thing, and I'm not sure how I lucked into it or out of it, although I still had to do the paper-based thing, so maybe I was not lucky. But I can still remember the first time I learned how to suture. So I remember, I practiced tying knots on, I think there was an orange or something, or some kind of vegetable or fruit. And then I learned how to do hand ties, on the handle of a tea mug. So we used to get sutures, and we'd get some time to practice these sorts of things. And so essentially, you'd see your preceptor do something, and then next time you'd get to do one. So I remember the first time I was with a patient was actually suturing. That was actually the first time I'd ever done anything, and they're thinking that you never know what you're doing, and I'm feeling like I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm just kind of following along my preceptor and trying not to have the drops of sweat off my forehead drip into the wound kind of thing. So there's a little bit of imposter syndrome there. And then the third part is to teach one. So after you've done one, you're good enough that you can, maybe next year when I've got a Med 1 with me, I can teach them a Med 2, so I can teach them how to do it because I've done at least one. So we now know, because of medical error, patient safety, and there's been a lot of research and evidence around that, particularly since about 2000, when the Institute of Medicine published a sort of a groundbreaking report, that there's been a huge shift in the way that we teach and learn in medicine, and that a lot of that has to do with simulation. We also know that during the pandemic, when much of the clinical environment was closed off to learners, that we needed to have much more access to simulation during those times for learners, because the evidence does show that even learning in a simulated environment is actually equal or sometimes superior to learning in an actual clinical environment with patients, depending on the level of learner and what the simulation activity is.
As a learner, I can see the value in simulated education. When we think about new modalities that are coming online, such as augmented and virtual realities, such as through the use of Vision Pro or Meta Quest, is there some value in that?
There's definitely value in that. Right now, the CHEB, there was a release yesterday, and I've been on the group developing the fourth floor for high fidelity simulation activities, that's been sort of an ongoing work for the last couple of years, but that's very expensive. It is very expensive to develop high fidelity suites. Now, it's great when you have these suites and you've got, piped in oxygen and medical air and that kind of stuff, so you can actually simulate the sorts of things you need to simulate, and it's a realistic environment where there's a control room. There's not people in with you when you're doing the simulation, and you're there kind of on your own with your group that's running through the simulation kind of thing. But it is very expensive to put that together. Not that augmented or virtual reality simulation is cheap, but probably in the long run, it's definitely cheaper than that. And you can develop programs and offer those to many people, that can, you buy the program, you have the equipment for it, and then you can run through many people through an augmented or virtual reality simulation without having all of the physical structure that you need, but there's good evidence for its effectiveness as well.
Yeah, that really sounds interesting. Another modality that seems interesting as well is generative AI. For example, the University of Michigan built a generative AI healthcare model that can produce various scenarios on sepsis treatment. What are your thoughts about using generative AI?
Ooh, that's a big question. So actually interesting though, CPDME, we're actually developing an AI arm right now, both in terms of faculty development and educational opportunities. So I think AI is something we really need to harness, harness the power of. Certainly our patients and I know learners are using AI, and probably people are coming to their family doctors or other medical appointments, having run their problem or concern through AI, and they come out with a pretty good list of here's what you should consider, here's what you should ask about, sort of thing. So I think there is a huge role for artificial intelligence in the way that we do things, not only in the way that we develop and deliver curriculum, but in the way that we work. One of the areas that's emerging right now for anyone who has to use an electronic medical record, so they have to, it can be very time consuming to type notes, or you even use drag and dictate, like a dictation kind of system to dictate your notes, can take time and you have to review it. So, with AI, you can have a microphone in the office that can listen in on the conversation with the patient, and then AI has the note completed, and you just need to check it over and hit the enter button, and it ends up in your electronic medical record. So things like that are amazing, and will save people time, because there is quite a large administrative and paper type burden in medicine and other health professions right now. So I think anything like that can be quite helpful, and I can certainly see in simulations when you develop the simulation, when you run the simulation, when you have the discussions about the simulation, that having an AI chat or something there ready to go to start thinking about other things that you might have missed. I think it'd be really interesting to see how that goes. I think the black box around AI is understanding the platforms, and understanding that the AI server platform that you're accessing has good data in it, because I think what comes out is only as good as what goes into it. So I think it's understanding what data sets are in the AI platform or server that you're using. So, and I honestly don't know enough about it. I'm certainly no expert in AI, but I know it's something that we all need to think about.
So when we dive into the world of how different healthcare providers learn to work together, what are the greatest challenges for interprofessional education?
So there's a few challenges with interprofessional education. One is, I guess, probably inequities in structures in different health professions. So just even looking at the playing field in terms of what different schools have as far as human resource, financial resources, structures that allow interprofessional education to happen, it's quite uneven across the playing field. In medicine, we're quite fortunate to have leads. Dr. Anu Mishra is the lead for interprofessional education in the skilled clinician program in medical school. But all other schools aren't as lucky or fortunate as that. Some schools are well resourced and others aren't. So there's some of that. The resourcing of it's a challenge. What isn't a challenge is the interest in interprofessional education. There are leads and champions who really believe in it strongly. I have to say, when David Anderson, our dean, asked me probably 9 or 10 years ago if I would consider being the IPE lead, I kind of said to myself in my head, so I work in emergency medicine. It's a collaborative practice environment that's interprofessional. And so I think I know lots about interprofessional collaboration. I don't know how much I know about interprofessional education, and it turned out I didn't know a whole lot about it. So there was a very steep learning curve when it came to that. And the key thing is when you're developing interprofessional education, curriculum related to it, practice opportunities related to it, structures related to it, it's from with and about, learning from with and about everyone. So it's developing it together. It's not one person, regardless of what your resources are, coming in and saying, okay, this is what we're doing. And so maybe there's a bit of that. Maybe there's some leadership in that to kind of get people to come along. But then it's really that collaborative process to get people to engage together. And I think there's something to feeling like you belong. Like if you don't feel like you belong in something, then it's hard to feel like that your thoughts and opinions are valued and regarded. So it's making that environment where everyone feels like they belong so that you can collaborate. Some of the most fun and probably some of the best educational research I've done is around interprofessional education. And even in the role I'm currently in, I'm still involved in 3 or 4 different educational research projects around interprofessional education, mostly with respect to simulation and psychological safety. But the people that are involved are quite engaged and a lot of fun and energetic to work with.
Yeah, definitely the healthcare team is very important, and there's a lot of aspects to it. Is there any particular profession that comes to mind that's underappreciated?
That's a good question. I don't think that anyone's underappreciated, but I think it probably has to do a lot with, again, that resourcing and the size of different schools. So, maybe like respiratory therapy, for example, which has quite a small program, although I think the government has now doubled their seats in the last year, and many of the programs that's happened to. So they may not be as well known, but for example, when you get to Med 3, in emergency medicine clerkship, you'll do an interprofessional. We have 6 hours of interprofessional education curriculum. It's all simulation there, and it's medical students, senior nursing students, and senior respiratory students. And I kind of think that they fly under the radar a little bit until they get into those sessions, and then they are just stellar, and people are, the med students in particular are looking at them kind of with their mouths open. They can't believe how smooth they are in the simulations, how much knowledge they bring. So I think you see examples like that some professions do a lot of simulated training and also interprofessional education type of training. But until you bring up some of these groups together in kind of natural teams that would work together, but they don't necessarily learn together, people are a little bit surprised about that.
Yeah, the team is definitely very important. Healthcare workers often have to break bad news. What are the best practices to break bad news to patients and their families?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And so we actually developed a simulation around breaking bad news, and this was born out of a lack of such curriculum in the emergency medicine residency program. So my program director, who was Dr. Janet McIntyre at the time, this was, I don't know, close to probably 7 or 8 years ago. She's now the chief of our department. But she said, on this review of the curriculum, there's not really anything on breaking bad news. And I kind of said, oh, that's interesting. And I just kind of thought to myself, so, I've had a 30-year career now in emergency medicine and probably a few more years left, not too many, but I just kind of did the math, thinking about how many times do you break bad news, and it's a lot. And sometimes it's very bad news, which isn't as frequent, but I forget. It was like in the thousands that over your career you'd be breaking bad news, and we never had any curriculum. So we developed this simulation session that's a half-day affair and I thought to myself, when I break really bad news, it's not just me. So when someone's been in a car accident and someone's had a heart attack and they've passed away, or despite our best efforts to save them, it just doesn't always happen, and you have to go break this news. And typically when we do it, it's often there's a nurse and a social worker, and we kind of go in and break the news, and I'll tell them the medical aspects and try to be empathetic, but it's a shock. And then nursing will often stay, and social work are fantastic, and they'll kind of come in and out. And I don't know how we run anything without social work. Like there's talk about an underappreciated health profession. They are one. So we developed this curriculum, and it was based, and we actually did a scoping review around breaking bad news and with learners. And there's this protocol called the Spikes protocol, and this was developed in the business field for breaking bad news when you're firing employees. So Spikes stands for, I'm not going to spell it out to everyone, but it's an acronym, and each letter in the word spikes stands for one of the things that we should talk about when we're breaking bad news. So it just provides a framework for learners to go back to and think about, that they cover all the necessary steps when they're breaking bad news. Like, what setting are you in? The S. The I, in Spikes stands for invite. Invite them to tell you what you know. So it's kind of set up like that. And it's the most commonly cited protocol. There's 10 or 12 of them, but it is the most commonly cited one. So we developed this simulation around developing a framework using the Spikes protocol and working together in an interprofessional team to develop a plan around terrible bad news that you might have to break. So, this has been something we've been doing for 8 or 9 years now. The learners quite enjoy it, having the opportunity to practice and work together and kind of learn from each other. So it's been good, and it helps to arm our upcoming learners with the tools they need to break bad news, the stuff that probably took me years to learn and perfect over the course of, multiple episodes of breaking bad news. So I think it's a really good thing to work with our learners and our health professions team as well.
Is there anything from the patient's end that they can do themselves to prepare?
Yeah, so there's actually evidence and study around this. It's hard for them to prepare because often, at least when it's like unexpected, and the definition of our bad news is that this is unexpected, unforeseen, critical, life-changing kind of news sort of thing. So most times people wouldn't be prepared. But what we do know is if it's done well and they're listened to and you follow a framework, so it does a number of things. One, it actually improves the health and wellness outcomes of family long term after they've been dealt with in an appropriate way, that they're listened to and responded to and heard. But it also reduces burnout for practicing healthcare providers when it's done properly and approached appropriately, and even debriefed as required, sort of after breaking the bad news. So we know that it actually makes a difference long term for everybody.
Providing bad news is an unfortunate part of healthcare. What advice would you give to a student interested in pursuing a career of medicine?
I read that last night. I was up late coming home from Emerge, and I don't usually check my email before I go to bed. And I shouldn't have last night either. But anyway, I did. And I saw your questions, and I thought about that for a little while, actually, before I went to sleep. And it takes you back to that time. And I can't imagine it was that different when I was applying to medical school. I was hyper fixated on getting into medical school, and doing, I guess, learning as much as I could about the medical field. I did not come from a family that had, actually, there's never a physician in my family ever before me. So I didn't really come with any understanding of what it was like. So I was trying to learn what I could, I guess, before I applied to medical school. So I had some understanding of that. So I think in different ways, that's a good thing to do, to have some understanding, or to talk with people to have an understanding of what medicine's like. Because I think even when most of my really good friends are not in medicine, and there's like this mystique about practicing medicine and, what happens in, these clinical areas. And maybe it's extra intriguing to people because I work in the emergency department, and there's been lots of stuff on TV, different TV shows and stuff. So there's this kind of mystique, but it's interesting. The advice I'd give to learners, or to people who are considering applying to medical school, are to take your time, okay? Because life is full of opportunities, and, applying to med school is just one of them. And it's not the be-all, end-all. And you should not judge yourself or your life on whether you got into medical school or didn't get into medical school, or it took you 5 times to get into medical school, because there are lots of ways people can contribute to society, and that's just one of them. The other thing is to enjoy life. So I have very few regrets in my life, honestly, and I can say that. There's not much I would do differently with respect to my life and the way I lived it. I've been very fortunate in my life. But one of the things I've said to myself, and I don't know what my parents would have said, was it wouldn't have been the worst thing if I wouldn't have gotten to medical school. And that's probably easy for people to say listening, especially students who might be applying. But if I hadn't have gotten in my first time, maybe I would have taken the year off. Maybe I would have traveled. Maybe I would have done something really different, something that you never get a chance to do in your life again. Because once you get into the course of training, medical school, residency, then you're in practice, then you might have a partner, you might or might not have kids, and your life is just kind of set on this trajectory. It's like the train going down the track, and it's hard to take a leave from that. So I tell people to just don't get yourself so anxious about it that you can't enjoy life. And if it doesn't happen, don't worry about it. Just continue to work away at it and enjoy life. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And I've always felt, if it's something you really want to do, and you're motivated to do it, that it'll happen for you at some point. But enjoy the journey. Okay, don't be too fixated on the destination. Enjoy the journey.
I like that. Enjoy life. Thank you, Dr. Miller, for your insightful discussion.
Thank you, Kane, for having me today. I've really enjoyed participating in the podcast, and I wish you all the best in this program as you move ahead.
And for the audience, thank you for joining us, and see you on the next one.